Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to This Week in Mormons. Glad to have you here. This is the premier Latter-day Saint News podcast. I'm Jeff Openshaw.
I'm Devin Thorpe.
Yeah, good.
Did I do it? Did I do it right, Jeff?
Not only did you do it right, you did so with aplomb, my friend. That was very good.
It's a
That was
thrill to
very
be here with you this week.
nice to
It's
see
a
you,
thrill
buddy.
to be back.
What's going on down there in Gator Country? How's life?
Yeah. I saw a gator in the swimming pool at our condo today, and then I
It's like,
realized it was plastic. It was the little
oh,
gator-shaped pool skimmer. But
I was like, is
there
that
for a
like?
second.
I thought it was some sort of weird way to scare away the gators. They put fake gators to keep the other gators
Yeah.
away because they're solitary.
Uh,
No, they're not.
I don't know. I think that would
Oh.
attract them. Gators like gators, I think.
Well, here I thought you were like straight up leaning into the cliche, but it wasn't
Yeah.
real. That's okay.
No, sorry.
Cool. Well, I hope everything is
There is
well.
a sign next. We have a little pond next to our place here, and there's a sign that says don't go in the water because they're alligators.
Yeah.
We've never
Florida's weird
seen
like
the
that.
alligators, but yeah,
Everyone
but
wants to people want to move to Florida, but because there's all the water. But I guess you got to restrict yourself to salt water in Florida. Like you don't go in the water unless it's the
yeah,
beach, despite all the many lakes everywhere. That would just be. I remember a handful of years ago, wasn't there? It was terrible, terrible tragedy. Some little
yeah,
kid was playing on the beach at one of the resorts at Disney World, and that's
yeah,
like their own little controlled lake thing that they own in front of the Grand Floridian. Kid goes near
yeah,
the water, and a gator got him. And
yeah,
they have signs
yeah. It's
up like you
horrible.
don't. There's a beach here, but you don't go down in the water. But man, what is going on in that strange, strange place? It's America's
It is.
Australia down there, Devin, where you live.
It is.
To quote Jack Donaghy.
It is. It's really funny to me, and you'd have some appreciation for this, having moved from Utah, which Utah is arguably the most Republican state in the country. Certainly one of the most Republican. But uh,
So is North Florida though. So.
but yeah, so Florida is about 50-50 or 51-49. Uh, but it's definitely culturally more conservative than Utah, which I
Yeah.
find to be very interesting. And that may just be northern Florida, but it's remarkably more conservative than Salt Lake City.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, more than Salt Lake
Yeah,
City for sure.
yeah, and I guess that's part of the juxtaposition of experiences, right? I left downtown Salt Lake City, the most liberal place in Utah, and moved to the most conservative place in Florida, and I'm wondering why it doesn't feel more liberal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm.
shame on me. Shame on me.
DC suburbs is interesting. DC itself, no surprise to anyone, right? What the political leanings of greater DC might be.
Mhm.
But I'm kind of like, you're kind of on edge here. I'm like, it's blue, purple country, but all I have to do is
Yeah,
drive 20, 25 minutes out. And next thing you know, you're a much more rural territory. And then based on the political signs, it's like totally different world. I mean, the rural
yeah.
urban divide is very pronounced in Virginia, which does make
Oh,
it pretty
sure.
interesting. Like just in terms of politics and the way things work out here, it's fun to
Yeah.
watch. If you can remove yourself from all the drama of it all, it's just interesting from a
Yes.
research standpoint to see how it is. Oh well, cool. Well, good times, my friend.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
we've got a great show this week, folks. Lots of good things are going to happen.
there are some interesting things.
Before we get there, I've had an interesting few weeks as well. They put me in the bishopric, so
Oh, no way.
no way.
Congratulations.
Well, is that what
That
we
that
say? Okay.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
That is pretty awesome. That is pretty awesome. So, first counselor, second counselor, bishop, what are
Second
you?
second counselor. Oh, not the bishop.
Second
Nobody
counselor.
would nobody would do that. Let's
Well,
Twim
that's
Nation, pray
great.
that this is as far as it gets. Twim Nation.
Congratulations.
Not that
Congratulations.
I do not believe that it's like elevation per se, but let's pray that I don't reach for the stars anymore. My bishop's only got about a year and change left until his time is up. So let's
That's a scary. I think you've got big things in your future.
no no no
The
no 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 no.
question is, will you have time for TWIM when you get called to be the bishop? That
I've
is the key question.
time is one thing, but I even debate like if I were, for one thing, to be clear, everyone, I've not been called as a bishop, nor do I think I will be. But even with being a counselor, it's more like, should I continue TWIM doing something like this? Because you're
Yeah.
increasingly more cognizant of the voice you put out there and your role in leadership and award and what that means. And I think on TWIM we have laughs, we have good times. I
Yeah.
try to be like measured in what we do here. I mean, I have my own
Yeah.
views on things. but we try to have respectful discussions, even with differing views in the things we do. But I'm always thoughtful about that. Like how would I feel if someone in my flock, for lack of a better term, listened to the podcast, and could that be a thing that could be a negative for someone's relationship with the church? And that's just something you have to
Yeah.
consider. When I was elders quorum president, I kind of went through the same thing. I thought, like, should I continue this for that reason? I was busy too, but like, or is this kind of segregated or sequestered enough from the rest of my life that no one really knows? Because I'm not like I advertise doing this in church or anything like that.
Yeah.
I rarely, if ever, bring up this podcast in a church setting, because I feel like it would be inappropriately promoting it, and you kind of like leveraging church for that. And I just
Yeah.
think that's just kind of just wrong ethically. So I would never do it. So I don't know. We'll see. So I think
Yeah.
so far I'm
My
still good.
my TWIM highlight was a few episodes ago when I was on, and I got an email from someone in our stake here in Jacksonville. Say, hey,
Oh yeah.
I've always been a Devon fan. I love the episodes when you're on, and now you're here living in my very stake. I'm so excited.
Well, now
So
you got to
you
go to
never
lunch with
know.
that
It's a
person.
small world. Yeah,
You've got to go to
yeah,
lunch with that person. You
yeah.
got to do it. I
So
mean, we
yeah,
had enough drama. I mean, back when ordained women was a thing, and Kate Kelly was in my same stake, and they were like board members. That was a whole fun thing going on here. My poor stake presidency was very measured and collected, but there were a lot of
oh
concerns
man,
during that
yeah,
stretch. Oh, that was fun.
yeah. That's tough.
Yeah, so a lot of cool stuff we'll get into this week. Obviously, some
Yeah,
interesting temple updates and interesting milestones. Some property damage for missionaries. The weird history of like white national, like radical far right nationalism in church. Um, the notion of that the mission mom is a lot more than that. As also preparation for Trek, everybody, because Trek is coming your way, even if it shouldn't. Uh, some updates from the media sense of crazy true stories, not just true crime, not the one you're all thinking of, but true stories of things that have happened to Latter-day Saints over the past 30 years, some of which are being adapted for screen. There's even more of that. And some updates on temple garments. A lot of cool things we're going to get into this week. And I don't even know. I don't even know where to start, Devin. There's so many choices. Maybe you can start. I don't want to start.
yeah,
You go
yeah.
ahead.
Well,
You go ahead.
let's jump into the mission mom story, if you don't
Okay.
mind.
No, go for it.
Um, so you caught this that I had missed. Fascinating little piece about. Um, Let me check her name here. Lisa Harkness,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who is now serving as officially a mission leader, which turns out is the new name for the spouse of a mission president. That is the official calling. And this is something that is kind of near and dear and interesting. So the article talks about how it is to sort of be the mom, the mission mom to more than 200 missionaries. She's serving in the Canada Montreal mission. But
Yeah.
my mother was had this job when my dad was a mission president in Spokane, Washington, and I was young enough to still be at home. My dad was a fairly young mission president, and so I was there watching her go through this. And one of the interesting things is she, until the day she died, she was a little bit resentful that although she was set apart, the same time my father was set apart, they did not record her as having served a mission at that time. And so she served a 3-year mission, worked full time in her mind, and did not get recorded on the records of the church as having served a mission.
Huh.
So that's interesting. I hope the fact that they have created an official title that did not exist when my mother served, that they do record them as serving missions now. That's only appropriate and fair. I hope that's what that means. Um, but I tell you, I don't think my mother was ever happier than serving in that role. What a joy every day. It was just, uh, I mean, she spent so much time, so much energy, and she just loved every minute of it. It even distracted her from, well, I won't say it. Anyway, she loved it.
I always
She
loved
loved
our
it.
one thing I love seeing, I mean, I love, we always call them, the mission mom when I was out in
Mm-hmm.
Spain, and they were both great. I served 3/4 of my mission with the Bowens, and then the last quarter of it with the new mission president. It's just fun to see how they interact, and for me, it was a lot of fun because while I had more time with the first one, I was in leadership roles in the mission for the last stretch, so it kind of made up for that, where I got to spend a lot more like one-on-one time with the mission president and his wife, the mission leaders, as we call them. And
Yeah.
that was really fun and really insightful. Another thing I loved at the time is they had the foresight to be more proactive in involving sister missionaries. This is kind of because it's one thing we've talked about for years on the show and even in the church. How do you let sisters serve in leadership positions? Like I've long held like being a district leader. They're district leaders in the Temple Square mission, for example, because there are no elders. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, as far as I know, being a district leader is an assignment. You're not called to it. You're not set apart for it. You don't do anything to it. Just given an assignment. And so why can't they do it? But I think the church has grown and adapted and looked for more ways to have them involved. And on my mission, it was really cool to see the way they would invite sisters up every month when zone leaders would go to Barcelona and have meetings with the mission president, usual little, weekend seminar kind of stuff. Um, they started inviting the sister missionaries from, I forgot how they decided, because it wasn't every sister missionary, obviously. I think it was ones that had so much time in the field or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but that was cool. And it was fun because it's like, yeah, they weren't the zone leaders, but our mission president saw value in saying like, yeah, I need to get the sister missionaries in here too and let them receive this counsel and not receive it secondhand from their dumb zone leader, me, right? Which made a lot of sense. So that was cool. Uh, Anyway, yeah, this article is a fun profile now that I've brought it up here of Lisa Harkness and how her title, they say, is her official title is mission leader. And this is a curious thing that I haven't like, I don't know how codified this is. They do show, like, I found another older story back in December. We talked about how they updated member tools so you can share contact information with mission leaders. And the verbiage there, they showed a picture of mission president and his wife, like Leif and Linda Erickson, and it says who served as mission leaders collectively during their period in Zambia, for example. So it's like a term we're using, but at the same time, if you go to LDS.org, sorry, Church of Jesus Christ.org, and search for mission leaders, you don't like really find much. And even the idea of mission leader in this article, this is probably just from where it comes from. This article is specifically from the Canadian portal for the church, is not from the main page. So if you click on it, it also takes you to a Canadian page about mission leader. But most of it, if you look for new mission presidents, it says very specifically mission president and his companion, the classic verbiage. So I don't know, maybe this is a newer thing that we're not pushing well enough, and we need to. And I don't think it takes away from the
Yeah.
idea of being the mission mom either at the same time. But I like this Q and
But I
A.
think yeah, I really think that although it's an endearing term, and in the gospel, in our church context, we think of mom as being high praise. Having a title other than mother for someone who is not, in fact, the mother to these people is very appropriate, but it should be totally formalized, so that the women who are devoting the same 3 years their husbands are don't come home and find themselves having served only as the wife of their husband for 3 years.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
it's
way more than that. It's way more than that,
Yeah,
and that's one thing I like, the idea of the mission mom. But I also worry about the restrictive connotations of that. You think, well, here's the president doing, and then here's the mom. Here's the mom doing
yeah,
motherly chores. And this article was brought
yeah,
up because it was Mother's Day, and we're trying to acknowledge that. But I think we're on the same
yeah.
page here. It's a fun profile, and they do a little Q&A with her, just about her experiences, the things she learns, how missionaries are part of their family. It's a very nice read. I love insights from people in these types of roles and seeing what they learn from. Like, I've never aspired to any calling, but I think it would be really interesting to be a mission president. Like, of all the things you could do in the
Yeah.
church, just a fascinating way to dedicate your time. One
It's
thing we know.
fascinating too.
No, no, you go
You
ahead.
pointed it out to me, and I
Okay.
think it's really an important thing that you pointed out to me before we went live, and that is that she has been serving in the general primary presidency, and that fact is not mentioned in the article.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I scoured it. I looked all over for primary presidency, council, or anything like that. And there
yeah,
was no mention of this. She was in the primary presidency just until she was the first counselor in it until
yeah,
last year. Because in 2021 is when they
yeah,
called Sister
yeah,
Johnson and the new president, or President Johnson and the new presidency, and now she's going to switch over and be the Relief Society president. I
Yeah,
mean, this is a woman who's spoken in general conference before.
yeah. You know, it really is. Uh, it was unkind and disrespectful to not mention her past standing and to imply that her only duty at this point is to be a mission mom. Uh, uh, this is a super accomplished leader in the church. And yet, I think it's not like this is an article about President Nelson where you don't need to explain the history, right? We all know that he's been an apostle for 40 years. There are people who don't recognize the name Lisa Harkness. It was totally inappropriate not to mention that.
It's interesting to me. Yeah, she spoke twice in conference, honoring his name, and then "Peace Be Still," both October 2019 and October 2020, respectively. She was a pandemic
Yeah,
speaker, even. Um,
yeah.
it's
She was
I'm
on
not the one.
yeah, she was on the primary general board for a number of years before she was
Yes,
called to the
before that.
presidency. Yeah,
So it is curious, right? I mean, she's been there since July 2021 after they did the release, and they've been in the mission field, and good for them. But it is a strange editorial choice to leave that information. I don't
yeah,
fully get why they would do that. Why not provide that additional context? Like you said, like to me, if they wouldn't do that to a male, it's highly unlikely
yeah,
they would not mention all of their previous service.
yeah.
If it was relevant to that, if it was like so and so who happened to be the general young men's president at another period of time, it would probably
Yeah,
come up. It would probably come
yeah.
up. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. All right, I've got a. I want to call this a fun one, even though hate crimes aren't fun. But I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
I you know
you
what
can
I
see
mean.
the humor in this. You can see the humor in
So,
this.
a man in Connecticut has been charged with a hate crime after setting fire to the missionaries' vehicle. Apparently, he lived in an apartment above the missionaries in Torrington, Connecticut. And according to police statements, the perpetrator was, quote, tired of the missionaries knocking on doors and trying to convert his family and friends. So, Samuel Van Dusen, 22, by the way, great mugshot. I don't have it in this article, but I saw it elsewhere, and just seems very pleased with himself. Was He was charged with a lot: deprivation of rights, third degree arson, first degree criminal mischief, and second degree breach of peace. Deprivation of rights is considered a hate crime, though, because he was
Yeah,
targeting the missionaries not at random, but specifically for religious reasons. And so he's been held, unless it's changed since we wrote the article, but he's been held on a $250,000 bond. And so Fox 61 interviewed people, and they said, yeah, that around 3 a.m. they saw a man stuff a lit rag into the gas filler cap in a Chevy Equinox and tried to, nuke the whole vehicle. So that's curious.
he accomplished very little. It
I
looks
mean,
to me from the photos that it looks to me like the car is going to spend a couple of days in the shop
it
to be
might be worse
repaired.
than that. I don't know. I mean, something happened to the
But
front windows too in the process. No one commented
yeah,
on
I
the fact that
suspect
there's a
they probably
giant.
probably broke in the fire department to make sure the fire was out.
Oh, I was going to say maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you drive a GM. Oh, you don't have a gassed car though. Never mind.
Right? Yeah,
I'm saying, is it a
yeah.
gas? Is it a gas cap that requires interior release to open it?
Oh, so maybe the
Whereas some
perpetrator
do,
did do that. Yeah, yeah.
some do, some don't.
I think
So
I think well, yeah, my GM gas cap on my charger port just is one of those you tap down and
little
it
spring loaded thing,
spring
yeah,
is yeah,
yeah, yeah. So this happened. Interestingly, too, the of kind of out of nowhere, the Council on American Islamic Relations spoke up about the incident. They don't provide a lot of context for why they of all groups did, but for some context, the church has done a lot with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, in the past. You might not hear about it, but I've even been to a CARE fundraising dinner at which the church, like Public Affairs for Southern California, bought a table. We do a lot of things that we don't always talk about publicly. But they said Americans of all faiths should be free to share their faith without fear of intimidation or attack. We condemn this alleged bias motivated attack and urge community leaders to speak out against the type of bigotry that inevitably leads to such incidents. And while we can chuckle a little bit about this entire thing, definitely worth noting that Latter-day Saints are very much in the minority in terms of being on the receiving end of hate crimes in the United States. In 2019, the FBI revealed it had been tracking hate crimes against religious groups for some time. It documented 15 anti-Mormon hate crimes during a certain period. But during that same period, Jews experienced hate crimes at 63 times the rate we did, and Muslims at 18 times the rate we did. So
yeah. That is
doesn't
really
make it
remarkable.
Yeah, it doesn't make it's not okay for anyone. There shouldn't be any a
Hmm.
single hate crime. But let's also bear in mind that there's a lot of people whose faith communities are much more under assault than we might be for something
Yeah,
like
and
this.
Jeff, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in terms of, at least in terms of orders of magnitude, the number of Jewish people, Muslims, and Mormons in the country is about the same, right?
I think that might be right. Latter-day Saints are a little bit under maybe 2% of the U.S. population, so it's probably close to that. Yeah,
6 million. Yeah. So it's, at least in terms of like orders of magnitude, it's
yeah.
pretty,
Or per
it's in that
capita,
ballpark.
it's far worse. Let's see here.
Yeah.
Well, now I want to look this up, but we should do other things. Yeah, Jewish is about
Yes.
1.9%. Jewish is 1.9%. Yeah, so Muslims
Yeah.
0.9%.
So they're about half as many. Yeah. Um, the I had a fun experience back in Salt Lake. I visited 2 weeks ago, after for the first time back since I moved to Jacksonville at Christmas time, and I gave a friend of mine a call, and he's serving as the bishop in one of the new wards, one of the wards assigned to the new chapel that is part of the skyscraper downtown in Salt
Oh,
Lake,
cool. I saw
and
that.
so
Yeah.
and my old ward where I used to live now meets in this building as well. So it was significant to me on multiple levels. So I'm excited to talk about it. It's interesting from the renderings. I never appreciated how the building was designed, but it is designed with a fairly overt chapel upon which a skyscraper sits. Uh, and so it's designed to appear that the building is sort of cantilevered over the
Yeah.
chapel, which is a little bit of a a visual trick. Of course, it doesn't really do that, but it's designed to appear that way, and it's really quite striking, quite beautiful. Um, and there are some really spectacular views from inside the chapel, not inside the chapels, but inside the meeting house portion of the building, looking down south and down into the valley. So it's really kind of a nice chapel. There are two chapels. The downstairs one is a little bit smaller than the upstairs one. The downstairs one has a bona fide, well, half court basketball court, but there is a hoop. And the upstairs one has a little smaller overflow and not doesn't have a basketball court. The chapels are nice. They're not spectacular. They are not special. I don't mean to insult anyone who's going to church in those wards now, but they're very nice. But I think there are 6 wards meeting in that building from at least 2 stakes, if not 3. I think it must be 3 stakes that are
Wow.
sending wards there. One from the Liberty stake, a couple from the Salt Lake stake, and the others from, I think, from the Ensign stake, if I'm not mistaken. And I could be, but um, it'll be a great blessing. Like the fourth ward where I used to attend, which is called the fourth ward because it was the fourth ward of the church, organized in 1849, along with the other first 29 wards of the Salt Lake area at the time. And it was the first time I understand that the wards were created in the church. I may have that wrong, but that's what I think. It's the first. So it was the fourth ward. Very historic, very cool. But for the last 30 years, since the Fourth Ward building burned to the ground, they have been wandering like nomads in the wilderness, going from guest spot to guest spot in other chapels. And now I took a picture of the Fourth Ward's name on the wall inside this new building, and
That's
it
cool.
has a look of a look and feel of permanence that they have lacked for 30 years. It's kind of exciting for them.
And
Big
isn't
deal.
it built on the site of the old Pioneer era social hall? I think I read something in the article. They've got like a little display area about some of the history of the actual lot that it sits on, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's in the building or if it's adjacent to it. There is a little museum
Oh, it's an
for the
underground
old
tunnel.
social hall
An
that's
underground tunnel entrance. There it is. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
it's immediately adjacent. It is not in the. It's not in the building
I'm looking at
itself.
this place up on Google Maps. Did the Harmons basically lose its entire side? Last time I was in Utah, that
Yeah,
Harmons had a big old sign on the wall right there, and I guess that's
yeah. The
been
sign is
subsumed by
must be gone. Yeah,
the building.
but yeah the they had a yard. This building has been planned since before Harmon's was built,
Yeah,
and
I
it's just a
imagine.
question of when it would get built and what it would finally look like. And I think, yeah, on every facet that I would judge it, it's a success. The building, the entire building looks great. It's a dramatic thing. The church stands out. It's clearly a church building there. I think it's just great. And of course, it's very functional, very functional. It's just going to serve a tremendous purpose and be a great blessing to a lot of people. And, a lot of folks have been, suggesting the church should invest more in churches downtown to kind of shine that light on the hill and to demonstrate a commitment towards down there. And so this is a nice step in that direction. It's just great on every count.
It's funny you bring that up because there's an article I almost put in for this week, but I don't know if we'd want to talk much about it. But over at By Common Consent, Kevin Barney wrote an article kind of about, he called it like basically getting to church. And I know you're not speaking directly about how accessible a church building is, but when you think about that, like most of our meeting houses, at least in North America, are in suburban areas, often just neighborhoods, overwhelmingly accessible primarily by car. And his whole point was wondering, like, should we be doing more or thinking more proactively about where we put our buildings? He shared some stories in it about how I think like the sister missionaries wanted to see if somebody could pick up an investigator or somebody along those lines. And it just kind of never went anywhere because everyone's just like it's an inconvenience for people to drive out of their way and pick up investigators and do this and that. That wouldn't be an issue if you had buildings that were more easily accessible for people who don't necessarily have a car. This downtown meeting house is an example. I mean, Devin, I think it's pretty darn close to where you used to live, I believe, right in downtown, right?
Yeah,
That would have
yeah,
been
it
your
was a
meeting house.
short walk. And, to put this into perspective, I think that within a half mile radius, let's call that, a short walk, I think there are 5 to 8,000 people that live within that distance of this chapel.
Yeah.
It's very densely populated because of all the tall apartment, skyscrapers and
Yeah.
stuff
And
that are
yes, all the,
apartments.
the skyscrapers of Salt Lake City.
Yes.
We could do a little more with the business building skyline of Salt Lake, folks. Let's be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
that Wells Fargo building has been the go-to for too long now. We gotta think harder. I do love urban meeting houses, though. I think it's a cool thing. This is obviously not the first time the church has done something like this. They haven't. I'm surprised there hasn't been much fanfare, but there's a new meeting house in my neck of the woods in Crystal City, in Virginia. A little bit different. The church, they didn't make it so the church part of it kind of stuck out like this one does, but they built a large condominium tower in Crystal City, and then the bottom two floors are a stake center with all the trappings of a stake center. This is not something the church, is new to the church out of the multi-use version, or of course abroad you find meeting houses that are built in all kinds of different ways. I remember one in one city in my mission over in I think it was in Cornellà. It was great. It was like a 4-story urban church building that we had, different levels with all the different stuff. And on the very top floor, it's Spain, but instead of a basketball court, they had a soccer court on the top level with like skylights and stuff. It was great. It was so cool to see that kind of investment making sense for the people, where they were. And my mission made it almost a novelty in the areas when there'd actually be like a freestanding meeting house on the edge of the city or something like that you had to mostly drive to get to or take a bus. It was kind of fun. So I'm glad you had that personal experience with that, Devin. That's
Yeah,
cool.
I was thrilled to have that chance, and it came just so totally randomly. Like, it was the last thing I did before I headed back to the airport, and totally random. Very fun.
All right, handful of temple things I'm going to throw at you real fast. The Rio de Janeiro temple finally dedicated, the church's eighth temple in Brazil. This was slated to be dedicated over 2 years ago. Its open house was coincided right with the shutdown around the COVID pandemic, and so it sat for a long time, and nobody knew when they were going to pick it up. In the in between, I believe we dedicated temples in. I think the Durban one still came just before COVID got right there, but then we've had Pocatello, a few other ones in between. But it's finally there. Elder Gary E. Stevenson traveled down to Rio de Janeiro and dedicated this beautiful building that has been just like just lit and not functional for 2 whole years. And so that's great. They did it. It's wonderful, wonderful for Rio de Janeiro to have its own temple. I mean, their closest one was. It's almost shocking Rio did not have a temple up to this point, given how large the city is in a Brazil context. So wonderful, wonderful news for them. Another news: the Yugo Guam Temple already going to have its open house. They are not messing around with this one. It's a much smaller building, simpler design. It's not using prefabricated panels like the what we're kind of pioneering in the Helena, Montana temple, which is a whole new construction method. That's going to be really cool to watch. But still, they only started building this temple in golly. Oh, I guess it was 2019. All right, so they broke ground quickly, but it was 2019. So it's been almost the 3 years, which is the typical turnaround time. But that went by much faster than it seemed. But they made haste. Small building, right? It's going to be one of the smallest ones in the church. It's nearly 6,900 square feet. That's very tiny. That's like down there with Colonia Juarez in terms of size. Um, but there's a stake in Guam, but it's very isolated. Wonderful to serve the saints there. And so they are going to be having the open house from last week, Wednesday, May 4th through Saturday, May 14th. So not sorry, out here in DC where it's like the open house is now like a part of life that's never going to end. It's just funny to see an open house that's like 2 weeks long, like they normally are, right? And then they're going to dedicate it on May 22nd by David A. Bednar. So that's great news for the Saints of Guam. Happy, happy news for them. Another quick update for you, Devin. And if you have anything to say
Okay,
about these,
thank you.
you just chime
I
in.
will. I'm not shy. You know me.
Okay. We held the groundbreaking for the temple in Farmington, New Mexico, which will be the second temple in New Mexico. I believe it's going to be about 25,000 square feet. It's kind of this newer generation of modestly sized temples, but with a new design. President Nelson announced it in April 2021 when he announced 20 odd temples in that conference, the one that blew everyone away. And you've seen a lot of the temples announced in that batch. Many of them are following what appears to be a similar floor plan. So they broke ground on it, usually roughly 3 years or so. So keep an eye out for sometime in 2025. And this temple in northwest New Mexico, you're not quite four corners, but Farmington's kind of up there close to Colorado and much farther west, will receive its own temple, which is super great news for them. And
Yeah.
lastly, since I mentioned the DC temple, yes, just some more fun for the church to publicize senators and other dignitaries, important people who have toured the temple who are not everyday folks. No, the important people have toured the temple, everyone. The politicos. There's Mitt Romney, there's Jeff Flake, lots of current and former senators, some of which are not members of our church, of course. I believe I see Amy Klobuchar right there. There's a picture with Justice Neil Gorsuch of the Supreme Court. He's hanging out. I don't know who else is in the picture with him, but they put him up in the header image. So they're loving all the fancy people who were coming, and now the temple is open as of the other week to everyone else. We're going this Saturday. I'm excited to finally take my kids to it. That'll be fun. But Supreme
The
Court
DC
justice have a
temple is
temple
my
coming
favorite. It's
as
my
well.
favorite temple.
As well, it should be. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what, if anything's changed on the inside. One thing I looked at based on the photos, and I'll have to verify this because it's been so long since I've been in there. When you used to walk in, you go to the recommend desk and you walk on that kind of sky bridge that goes into the main building. And when you get right into the main building there used to be a very large mural spanning that entire lobby. And from what I've seen in the pictures of the updates, there's still artwork there, but it looks like it's smaller, that artwork, than it used to be. Because if I remember, it was a very large
Wasn't that the
mural.
mural of the Second Coming?
I think
I
it was
think
that
that
whole.
was. I think it was that mural. It was the original of that Second Coming mural.
And yeah, and so I'm sorry I'm doing this kind of on the fly while we're chatting. I'm trying to see if I can remember because I've seen the new pictures of it, which now, yeah, I think they totally changed it, right? Because now if you look at it, um, you might know, Devin. Let me see if I can open an image and I can't share it to you. Never mind. Just search for
Yeah.
it. Anyway, now it's was definitely a more modern picture of the Savior, but very much more just right there
Yeah.
in the middle of it. Let me see. Yeah,
My favorite thing about that temple.
Yeah, they got rid. Yeah, it's the old. Yeah. No, sorry, I'm thinking out loud a lot right now.
It's all
Continue.
right. You're allowed.
What's your
But
favorite thing
yeah,
about
my
the
favorite
temple?
thing was that the design of the endowment rooms was such that they didn't have an aisle down the middle. They had
Yeah,
aisles on
yeah,
the
yeah.
sides, and so everyone would race to sit next to their spouse because there were about 8 seats in every endowment room where you could sit next to your spouse, and they wouldn't have you. At least when I was going to that temple, you wouldn't be queued up in the same formal sense that you were in other temples. They would just sort of let you wander in, and then you could go sit next to your spouse in one of those 8 seats that was next to the women, or if you're a guy like
Oh,
I was. So,
here we go. David Noyce at the Salt Lake Tribune. Thank you, David. Hold on. There's actually a story about this. I'm not imagining things. And I do love
yeah,
that. I've loved going to sessions of sitting right next to my wife. It's one of the best things.
yeah,
So the prominent painting has been removed from the newly renovated temple and is being, quote, refurbished. So it says longtime patrons will notice some subtle changes, but that big mural titled "The Last Judgment," that's what it was, the Second Coming, and it has
mm-hmm,
this big old mural right there.
mm-hmm.
Um, let's see, and I like the article. It says some may wonder what happened to it, especially given the drama around the Salt Lake Temple, the Manti Temple, for example. It's true it's been taken out, but it will be. They say, a church spokesperson, a proper placement will be determined at a future time. So
Yeah,
they often change it all. I hope they bring it back. That's a pretty notable work. And it looks like they could. They've got a very large mural there now, which is it's Dan Wilson's His Return. Nice painting. It's flanked by some plants, which I assume could be moved if they needed to put the mural back in place. So, well, I'm
yeah,
glad there's a story about that. So it's being
yeah,
referred. I hope that means they bring it back. I hope they don't. I mean, it is the Last Judgment. Maybe it's less friendly for an open house. Like they want the open house to have this nice, just kind of pleasant picture of the
yes,
Savior, and not one of like people cowering in repentance before the return. That okay, I'll keep an
yeah,
eye on that. If they replace it like after the open house, and this is specifically a PR move, that fascinates me
yeah.
alone from a PR perspective.
Well, I'd also love to look at that mural again with my latter day wokeness. Having seen that 30 years ago, um, I'm not sure that I was looking at it with the same lens I would look at it today.
Yeah, I'm
And it
sure
would
too.
not be, you know, given when it was created, it would not be hard to imagine that it had racial or other um, tones that had sort of worked in. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like when it comes back.
Yep,
If
yep,
they've
yep.
changed some of the details in the photo in the process of refurbishing it in terms of like who's repenting and who's celebrating the return of the Savior.
Who among you is repent? Who's actually repenting?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
curious. Interesting stuff. Yeah,
So
there it is. Well, I
yeah,
hope they bring it back.
yeah.
There was also you kind of like this one, Devin. I'll throw it to you. Some temple dedication
Okay.
milestones for the brethren. Kind of a cool
Oh
little
yes. So this
little
was an
factoid.
interesting story, and I appreciate you tossing that one to me. But yeah, President Nelson has, of course, is controls the schedule of who conducts the dedications for all the temples, and every one of the 15 brethren have now dedicated a temple just in the years since he was called to be the prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's obviously a deliberate move that he's made to rotate that among the brethren that way. And, if you're a young apostle, that's really kind of a neat deal. Some apostles don't live to be especially long and don't serve. We think of the ones that do serve for 30 or 40 years. Some serve for 6, right? And traditionally wouldn't have had that opportunity. And so it's great that he's doing that to make sure they all get that special opportunity.
It's actually yeah, and I think the church had mentioned this before, but it's interesting to note that President Nelson himself then has one of the lowest rates of temple dedications during their tenure. There have been 11 temples dedicated during his tenure and 3 that are upcoming in the next 2 months. And President Nelson has only done 2 of them. He did Concepcion, Chile in October 2018. And then, of course, the Rome, Italy temple, which was a big one. Like, who else, given the
Yeah,
effort we went to in Rome, who else was going to do that one?
yeah,
He hasn't
yeah,
done one since then. That's it.
yeah.
And
That's interesting because he's so healthy. You and I have talked about this before. I
yeah,
mean, he looks like he's constantly ready to go run a 10K, and could probably run circles around most of the 15 brethren. And so he does just beg the question: how long are we going to have him in the saddle? Because it could be a long time based on his apparent health.
here is my thought on the matter, and this is purely speculative. I think he's got to be around until they fix up Salt Lake, until that's done. I think he has to be preserved to see that project that he started come to completion. And now that's been
Hmm.
delayed even further, though. That's the issue, right? Now the salt, they think it won't be till what now? It's like 2024, 2025, something even longer. They delayed it even further. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be a little optimistic here and think it'll have to be at least that long. They also noted, I didn't realize this. Usually the church announces well in advance once they've announced the dedication, which one of the brethren is going to do the dedication. That's pretty much custom, right? Uh, and all scheduled ones have announced other people. They have not announced who is going to dedicate the Washington, D.C. temple still. And I think many assume it will be President Nelson, but I find it curious. And this is cool. The church, this isn't like, a random blog. This is the church news actually saying that they're noting that with the possible exception of the Washington, D.C. temple dedication, it still does not have an assigned leader, but everything else has been doled out to the others. So that's kind of interesting for them to actually note that. And I'm curious why they have not said so. I think that's also very interesting.
Hmm.
And also,
Hmm.
it's worth noting President Gordon B. Hinckley uh, did 81.8% of the temple dedications during his presidency, which is amazing because so many of those were the mini temples that he announced, and we just churned out like 50 in a year. And so President Hinckley must have
Yeah.
just been jet setting all over the world,
Yeah.
cranking
In
out
his
dedications.
90s. In
Yeah,
his
for most of
90s.
these. So
Wow.
fascinating stuff. Fascinating
Yeah.
stuff, man.
Amazing.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. I'm going to talk about the Manacled Mormon. This was a case that's come up a bit more in the press because of Under the Banner of Heaven being out right now on FX/Hulu, right? Because it's another. You'd think the story of the Manacled Mormon, and this is to be clear. If you're listening with children, this would be a time to turn it down or pause or return later. But it was also known as the Mormon sex in chains case. This was never brought to court because of extradition issues and things like that. But there's an American woman, Joyce McKinney, who was in England and allegedly kidnapped a missionary, Kirk Anderson, from like the steps of a meeting house in the UK, and then chained him to a bed and raped him repeatedly. And that's what this was. So the thing is, then they fled she was an American, but she fled to the United States on a falsified passport of all things, but was never able to be brought to trial for that exact case. Her history is bizarre, even beyond that. She made clones of her pet bull in South Korea. She was later charged with plotting to have a teenager break into a house to raise funds for a prosthetic leg for a horse. And I would think this is made up, but like I checked the citation. Um, she sued Errol Morris for making a documentary about her. And in 2019, in the San Fernando Valley in California, she also killed a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor in a hit and run crash in the valley. This is a checkered history, if ever there
Wow.
was one.
Wow.
So they apparently posed as an investigator to Mormonism, allegedly using a fake handgun and chloroform. And then 3 days later, after what they did to the missionary, allegedly, I guess I still legally have to say, I don't know, but they freed him, and there was a report to police and all kinds of things. So we're not going to tell you the whole story. You want to know why? Because the fine people of the woke liberal media are going to do it for us, folks. Um, that's right. Now we get to see the Manacled Mormon case will be a movie called Sinner versus v Saints, like Batman v Superman, and that went great. So what could go wrong with this title? Sinner v Saints: Dawn of Justice. It's going to star Freddie Highmore of The Good Doctor, or you might have known him when he was a kid when he was like Finding Neverland, and Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones. It will be directed by Tim Kirkby, who also did Fleabag and Veep. The press release is okay. The press release says Sinner v Saints takes us on a riotous journey, and we were immediately captivated by Jill Hop's witty script, which brings this incredible true story to life. Why is everyone like up about this? I mean, I get that it's a crazy story, but the way this is written, it's like, what a wacky, zany, good time this is going to be, folks. Wait till you hear
Yeah.
the witty dialogue. It's like, well, there was a man who was sexually assaulted during all of this. People, I don't know
Yeah.
why we're
Yeah.
having a good time with this. So yeah, apparently that's going to be a it's going to be a film. I guess I didn't specify whether it's it says feature film, but it did not specify whether it's going to be actually released in cinemas or in this day and age, straight to streaming or anything like that.
Yeah,
Especially given who's directing it, it has primarily HBO type credits. So
yeah,
anyway, that's gonna be coming to a place near us at some point in the future, and we can have another fun, weird period of our history thrown out across the your home
yeah.
screen of potentially dubious quality.
Yes,
Yay!
I think well, it'll be
Yay!
interesting to see how we're portrayed in that. I've been watching Under the Banner of Heaven, and yeah, I imagine you have too. But it has been interesting to me that it hasn't bothered me much because it is pure fiction, right?
Well, even the main character
The
is fiction. They made up the investigator.
Yeah, I mean,
That's not a real
it
person.
every aspect of it just feels made up. It doesn't. There's no resonance, right? I was raised in Utah. I was alive when this happened, and it doesn't resonate at all. Some of the storytelling around, Mark Hoffman, for instance, that resonated with me, right?
Yeah.
They got
Oh
some of
yeah,
those
and we
details
had
right.
murder among the Mormons last year. See,
Yeah,
we're all over it
yeah.
right now.
So this one is it's just kind of fun to watch because it's not about us. It just pretends to be about
Does it
us.
also have just like wacky, witty dialogue, rapid fire
No, no, no,
delivery, all kinds of fun
no,
stuff? It's just a fun story of
no,
murder
no.
and questioning one's faith.
It's melodrama about a fictitious church. That's all it is. Uh, and they use some Mormon phrases, but there's it's just shocking how little of it really resonates. And that's what there was this op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And I confess, I'm not a huge fan of what usually gets posted in the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal, but but Daryl Austin, a guy from Utah, wrote, and I thought it was interesting that he said exactly what I feel. But he said, he quoted an LDS historian who said that none of the Mormon scholars I was sitting with in the premiere, all of whom know full well how to apply an open critical gaze to our own culture and tradition, recognized ourselves or our people in the show. That's just it. It just, as you watch it, it's kind of entertaining. It's an interesting story, but it just feels so far removed from what we know about our own church that it just doesn't have that connection to authenticity. It's just fiction. You're just watching a fictitious show about a fictitious church.
I guess the main thing you have to wonder though is for the non Latter Day Saints who are watching it, do they appreciate the nuance and the distinction that it
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
fictitious portrayal of a fictitious? Because I've got colleagues who have seen it, and they're like, "You
yeah,
guys do this," and I'm like, "No, no." And and this is exactly what the church didn't like, 19 years ago
yeah.
when the book came out. And now instead it puts us on the defensive a bit, and we have to field questions. It's like, no, 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 no,
But I
that's
think I
not
read
quite a
the book.
thing. No,
I read the book, and at least the book, you felt like it was about the church, and let's be clear about the fundamentalist groups adjacent to the church who were practicing polygamy and some of the crap that was going on, and that's part of the problem with the new show is that it essentially assigns these people who are in fact not members of the church in good standing as if and treats them as if they were in fact
yeah,
members in good standing and just members of the faith, and they weren't. They were fundamentalists adjacent to the church, and there's a huge difference, as any of us in the church know.
yeah, yeah, like McKay Coppins, exactly, exactly. I hear
Yes.
you.
Yep.
Well, ones that it's fun. I guess we'll be covering Under the Banner of Heaven until it concludes. It's come up every
Yeah.
week. It's kind of funny. There's
Yeah, I'm
always
sorry.
something.
Yeah. Some. Yeah.
All right. Here, I love me some demographic analysis over at our friends at Times and Seasons. Fun little article from Stephen C. It said, "The future of the church," this is part 5 of a series, "when will there be more African wards than North American wards?" And so if you've somehow missed it, the church is growing very quickly in Africa, compared to anywhere else in the world. And so he runs a projection by starting point in 2010, driving the percentage. He's doing 11-year increments based on he says with enough elbow grease, I wish I could get a more precise estimate. Growth rate is extrapolated thus far as undoubtedly an oversimplification. He's trying to work all these different things into it to project a growth rate across different regions of the world. And the question really is like, will Africa surpass North America? North America has the most congregations of anywhere in the church. And will it surpass it? And he's got it somewhere around nipping up on 2050, maybe a little bit before that, according to his projection, which again is just a projection, right? Interesting to think about. Think about that in general, really, when you get to it. Like, how would that be? It's pretty far in the future. At the same time, it's 28 years in the future, which isn't crazy far in the future. I mean,
Yeah.
what was 28 years ago in 1994? Friends was premiering. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
um, I think that's kind of interesting. And he says it's not written anywhere that the church's institutions have to be based in the United States. I mean, they are kind of like they are because they are, right? But he says like
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the next half century, we'll be broadcasting General Conference from Accra, which is the capital of Ghana. Additionally, it may become more difficult to justify subsidizing non-technical applied education at BYU for a well-off minority of U.S. church members when the population center is shifting elsewhere. That's an interesting comment, honestly. And he says he suspects the drive to internationalize the Pathways program is part of an anticipation in these shifts, but that's, of course, just conjecture on his part. A lot of conjecture here to go around, but
Yeah.
it does bring up an interesting point where if the growth rate in North America and elsewhere stays kind of level and it grows, but not increasing, we've been decreasing on growth rates, whereas in Africa, it just keeps going up and up and up. I have to
Yeah. The
wonder
more
what that would be like, though.
That's so far into the future. I'm a little skeptical of his projections. Even he
Sure.
explains, so there are a lot of good reasons why the growth rate we're seeing now, which he just simply assumes continues, will slow. But it's easy to believe that on the schedule he predicts, the number of congregations in Africa will exceed those in South America. And
Yeah.
he's saying that could happen by 2030 or so. Um, whether that happens in 2030 or 2040, it's clear it's headed in that direction. And that's much more likely to occur. Um, One of the interesting observations is that the growth in South America has flattened to, according to his data, essentially zero. That there
Yeah.
is no growth in South America over the last 11 years. So that's an interesting thing when the growth is so rapid in Africa. So anyway, it'll be fascinating to see what this picture, in fact, looks like in 2030, 2040, and 2050.
And I
It'll
am
be very
curious about
cool.
that. If you look at the church's website, official reported members on the rolls in South America is 4.2 million members in South America. What is unclear to me, actually, let's see, are they including Mexico? No, and that is like geographic South America. Okay, that's not Latin
Mm-hmm.
America. That is South America.
Mm-hmm.
So cutting off at Colombia, right? Panama is not part of this. Panama is considered North America, I'm assuming, based on this. Let's double check. Yes, it is. North America has 9.5 million members. And South America has 4 million members. Africa, for all the growth, which is still wonderful, not even a million members in all of Africa. 736,000 members across the entire continent, across 60 odd countries, right?
Yeah.
So it has been growing much faster, and that's the one thing you can see when you see the growth rate where it's everyone else has kind of gone up. Yeah, I mean, you can. Man, I'm looking at this total church membership, the way it's kind of plateauing for most of them. Europe's probably going down. Yep, Europe's going down. Europe has 500,000 members. Um, the trend line is quite real in Africa, so it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to watch that. Oceania, how's that doing? It's fun to see this by region. Yeah, so Africa does have the second largest by region. It's got North America, South America, then Africa. Africa's got, oh no, sorry, I think Asia might have more. Sorry about that. Then Asia, 1.25 million members. Then Africa, then like Oceania, and then little Europe. I love you, Europe. You and the faithful
Yeah.
saints who have no converts coming your way. Bless you all. Wonderful people.
It'll be interesting to see if anything changes in Asia. I wouldn't predict it based on my experience in Asia, but Uh, yeah, it's an interesting question. There are a lot of people in Asia. Uh,
Well, and now that Bong Bong Marcos Jr. is going to be the president of the Philippines, there's no stopping him.
yes.
All bets are off. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's a good point. Philippines has been a fertile territory for us. So
Just a little
interesting.
bit,
So, yeah, but it's
and I don't think it's by chance. It's the only Catholic country, in Asia. So of course we have
of
more
course,
fertile
yeah,
ground in a Christian nation than elsewhere. Makes sense.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, this is fabulous stuff. Let me just pull up something that you caught and I found fascinating, as I think you did
Oh,
too. If you don't mind, I'll jump into this Hank Smith piece
yeah, go for it. Go for
that
it.
you flagged. But you know, Hank Smith, BYU professor, retweeted a white supremacist named Dan
Whoopsie.
McKinley, and then after having the error called to his attention, he deleted or unretweeted the tweet. Um, but the article here by common consent is a fascinating deciphering of the white supremacist sort of doctrine, faith, pseudoscience, et cetera, et cetera. And it is just fascinating to sort of listen to it deciphered or to read it. So I really do recommend this by common consent article to everyone, because you kind of go, oh, when you hear that, that's what that means. Oh, yeah. It was just a constant one of those for me. Um,
Oh, it's nuts. Like when you go down the deep end. I mean,
yeah,
I'm glad that Hank Smith retract. For one thing, it's like it's a lesson to all of us. Don't retweet something because a couple words in it sound good and it
yeah,
makes sense. Take the time to make sure you're not retweeting someone who believes that Mormonism is the inheritance of the ancient Abrahamic fertility cult, the Celtic Christianity of antiquity, and the American Enlightenment. It is also a
yeah.
merger of the 13th bloodline, the Merovingians, which is a white European thing, with lost Amerindian esotericism. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
which is almost indecipherable, but sounds vaguely flattering to Mormons. And then you sort of break it down and understand the nonsense that's baked into this, that's clearly and overtly white supremacist. You just go, holy, wow.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's essentially it's talking about pure blood all the time. That we are inheriting that, slamming other faiths like people in Eastern religions, for example. Like we look to them for truth. Um, Talking about Joseph Smith was a direct blood descendant of Jesus Christ. Yeah, his primordial
yeah,
Irish ancestors practiced a form of Christianity that was destroyed by Rome. He had the divine birthright to the primeval priesthood. There's some weird stuff out there, my friend.
yeah,
Makes Denver Snuffer look normal. This is great stuff. Good to know.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I've only got one bit. Well, first of all, Trek Essentials. Devin, will you be going on Trek? Will you be going on Trek this year?
I have been such a fan of Trek.
No, you
Um,
haven't. No one's a fan
yes,
of Trek.
I have been a fan of Trek since I didn't go when I was a teenager. I remember one of my best friends went on Trek. Probably the guy I was hanging out with the most that summer. He went on Trek, and for some reason I couldn't go, and I don't remember now what it was, travel or something, and I couldn't go. Oh no, it was he was 14 and I was 13, and so I wasn't invited and didn't get to go. And just the way things worked out, I never got to go as a teenager, missed it. But I remember he got in trouble and got kicked off. Got kicked off Trek because he couldn't handle it. I think they did. They at that year they gave him some unholy amount of time for teenagers to go pray. I mean, they gave him like hours. Go pray for hours alone, wander in the wilderness. So he set off walking to the nearest convenience store, which was like 7 miles away. He said, "Okay, you're gonna give me 6 hours. I'm gonna go get a soda." And they caught him and sent him home.
And they
But
sent him home. They didn't let him stick
yeah,
around.
Yeah, which of
That's
course, is like
bad.
the perfect way to reward him for wandering off.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but yeah, I missed out on that so much that it haunted me for years, and so I finally got to go a couple of times when I was in the stake presidency years ago, and great experiences, really and truly great experiences.
I don't get
I loved it, but
I was gonna say I don't get the history of Trek. Like,
yeah,
this was not a thing in Southern California. I do not know anyone who did anything anywhere close to this, but now I see it. It's happening in my stake here. Like, I see kids doing it elsewhere. So
yeah.
I know it might have been a Utah thing for a long time. Was there some weird pivot point when we decided to encourage saints outside of the Intermountain West to also do these? And was that in more recent
Yeah,
history
I
or
have
not?
no idea if there's any data on, firming up testimonies, getting more kids on missions. I have no idea if there's any data on any of that. Um, and no idea.
Well, I mean,
And so I don't know if I don't know if if a prophet somewhere along the line said everybody ought to do this. But I rather loved the experience that I had as an adult, supporting kids doing it, and I think every stake does it differently, right?
yeah.
And so I went with a stake that had a really low bar. Like, let's make this, relatively speaking, a safe experience. We're going to take nurses. We're going to make sure everybody's got plenty of water, and we're going to feed them enough that no one, we're not going to, it's not going to be feasts. It's going to be dinner. But no one is going to pass out because they didn't get enough calories. That sort of philosophy. And so it was a really fun experience for most of the kids with that, a meaningful spiritual encounter. There's some things that still get exaggerated. Um, the I thought the group I went with did a pretty good job of acknowledging that, like, when the story of the men leaving to go do the Mormon battalion was not portrayed as a burden or an obligation. Sometimes it's portrayed by some stakes as being sort of a thing that the army came and stole the men or something against their better judgment. Of course, the brethren were thrilled that there was an opportunity to go earn some cash that they desperately needed to march to San Diego, and it was a huge blessing to the
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And so in my stake, that was portrayed reasonably well, and uh, but the it was kind of fun to watch the girls pulling the hand carts themselves up a hill, and to see how moved they were by the experience, and then to see the boys come back and help them finish. It was really a moving experience. So it can be a really powerful thing. Um, but of course, we're not here to talk about any of that.
Well, no, I mean,
Today, we're here to
no,
talk about
Devin,
funny
you've
clothes.
No, Devin, you've humbled me because I'm not a believer in Trek, probably because I didn't do it
Yeah,
growing up, and it's always
yeah.
been
Like,
a
I mean,
peculiarity for me. But here you are with worthwhile experiences, and many other people have
yeah,
them. And now I'm terrified I'll somehow get involved in it now that I'm in the bishopric. I'm trying to
yeah.
avoid it. Uh,
But I
and,
have to admit, there's a part of me that's a little offended by these Trek essentials that Deseret Book is now selling.
well, of course, because
Uh,
this is just an article at LDS Living. This is all the church industrial complex all working
yeah,
together. It's LDS Living, owned by the church. All they're saying 12 Trek essentials. They're not giving you tips. Get the most from your journey. It's literally just links to items you can buy from Deseret Book. A Trek apron, a Trek blouse, Trek bloomers, a Trek Frontier shirt, a Trek Pioneer shirt.
yeah,
There's no tips on like how to get through Trek or anything like that. It's just
yeah,
saying, hey, you can buy this Pioneer shirt for $25. Then you can buy a
yeah.
Duck Vest for $25. And you can just, your Trek satchel, your faith in every footstep bandana. You could also buy Trek the movie,
And don't forget your Trek suspenders.
which I can't believe
Yeah,
they
you're,
still sell because the poster of Trek the movie says it's a Mormon thing. How could they? How can this even be? How have they not
yeah.
demanded the producers of said film change their ways? Oh boy, when did that
Yeah,
come out? I remember I watched Trek the movie once. I think someone actually was nice enough to someone sent me a screener, which was fun. But anyway, you can buy Trek
yeah,
stuff, and LDS Living and
yeah,
Tall are going to help you to do that. Okay,
yeah, yeah.
fine.
This just reminds me of church for rich Mormons. That's, I guess, what bothers me a little bit because I the stake I was in where we went a couple of times. We
That's
went we went with a rich stake, um, and we were sort of a lower income inner city stake, and both stakes did a really good job of making sure that you were using hand down, hand me down kind of things. That if you bought anything, you bought it at DI. This was a low budget affair that put no economic pressure on people. This was about a spiritual journey, and the idea that you might spend 100 or $150 to outfit someone, or $200 if you got changes of clothes, um, that kind of bugs me.
well, yeah, no,
It
man.
offends my sensibilities about trying to make this an egalitarian experience that is spiritually meaningful to people.
Well, look, Devin, you can have the good photo op or not. You can't have kids just standing there.
And their
They
Lands
can't.
End shirts,
Yeah, that was going to be
their
optimistic,
Lands
but
End
sure,
stay. Yeah,
they're Land's End shirts. Yes, exactly.
yeah,
If it would have been me, it would have been like wearing my Rage Against the Machine T-shirt,
yeah,
back in the '90s, I guess, something like that. So
yeah.
anyway, that's
Anyway,
fun. Last little bit of news here for the week. Some interesting news that came through the apparatus of Salt Lake City. Updates on military temple garments. If you haven't been familiar with this, maybe you have. So, garments are white. That's the idea when you buy them from a distribution center. But for many years, members of the military have been able to buy specially produced garments that essentially match the colors of their uniforms. Because if you're wearing your combat fatigues, and who for many is their everyday wear, unless I don't know how the rollout's going for the Army's replacement for their actual like office uniform, which is a cool idea. But usually it's a olive greenish t-shirt you see underneath there, right? In many cases, they designed this so you could get garments that were that color fabric that were marked up appropriately as garments. So the members of the military were not wearing a garment layer underneath all of that, which would be 3 layers of clothing, day in and day out. Of course, the one thing to bear in mind is usually it's not uncommon for them to take off their coat and be just in the brown top while they're doing things. But it's up to them to figure out, right? But the church has offered this to members of the military for many years. They're going to be discontinuing that, though, and instead allowing it to better meet the needs of uniform requirements. As they say, the church will now provide undergarment marking services free of charge through Beehive Clothing. The release doesn't go into detail about like what that means. Does that mean you just kind of buy your stuff that you have and you have to like send it out to Beehive Clothing and it comes back? And then if that's the case, what do you do when you don't have your military undergarments in the first place? Not quite sure, but they will take care of that free of charge through Beehive Clothing. I'm sure everyone can sort it out. It's available to all branches of the U.S. military. U.S. military people. Sorry, I just like that. It's like, you know what? If you're serving in the Ukrainian military, tough caboodle.
tough. Yeah.
Well, no, okay, it does say other equivalent organizations outside the US. So I don't know why they don't just say military branches worldwide. This kind of goes back to the whole, American centric nature of things, right? Firefighters, and then local, county, state, and federal law enforcement officers, kind of as needed, right? So I guess you have to figure out what the process of that will be, what it will entail. And it's interesting to see this change because it was many years ago they updated garments themselves where, garments have markings on them, but they changed it to print those on to the garments instead of being stitched. And by updating the entire process to do that with newer garments, it makes a process like this one all that much easier because it's much more of an undertaking to say send in your stuff and we can embroider them more or less, as opposed to, like it says here, marking services free of charge. So it's cool they're doing this. I'm glad they're supporting people in uniform who need this kind of help. um, I'm hoping I not being one who serves, I don't know if that's like onerous to have to like take all your stuff and like ship it to the church and get it back as opposed to just going online and ordering garments that are designed for you. I'm not sure, but I can understand the church kind of getting out of that game because it gets too hard to keep track of, like they say, uh, the needs of uniform requirements, right? Those evolve, different services, different countries. like where do you draw the line on how many specially produced garments you're making for different
Right.
organizations,
But
as
I think it's
opposed to just
cool that
letting
they
them
do
discard them?
this.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool solution to me.
Yeah. So good for
Obviously,
them.
it's extra work compared to just ordering garments, but um, also it allows for members who are going to benefit from this to have much more peer friendly underwear, uh,
That's true too.
which
Yes.
which is important. And so I think most folks that will use these will be glad to go to the effort. I hope that's how they
Well,
feel.
I encourage our. By the way, our email is down right now, folks. So don't email. Message us on Facebook. Message me on Facebook if you want to talk to me. I'm sorting through some stuff, but we that's a whole story. We lost our Google Workspace for the time being. But send me a note if you're in the military. I'd love to hear about this. I should honestly ask some of the people in my ward. I serve in a ward that's wedged between two sizable military installations because you got Quantico on one end and Fort Belvoir on another, to say nothing of some other areas. And this is DC, right? Uh, I have to imagine this could affect some of these individuals. I'd be curious to get their feedback. You know what? I'll look into this, Devin. I'm going to the movies tomorrow night with an Air Force guy. Tomorrow night, we'll find out. He
I
might
want to
enjoy it.
hear. I want to hear what you learn.
Maybe I'll send people the news and see what they think about it. All right, good deal. Well, folks, it's been real. It's been fun. This is kind of a longer show than I planned. An hour 10. Where did the time go?
Sorry.
That's not what you're saying. You're wondering when this interminable time will be over, but now it is now. Also, big shout out to those of you who watch on YouTube. Hit that. If you don't watch us on YouTube, it's fun. You can see Devin and I talking to one another, laughing, and you can hit that
Yeah.
subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Always get updates on when we put out these videos. We encourage you to do that. And of course, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a pleasant, lovely review that I'll read on air. And once again, major thank you to our Patreon supporters for supporting the show financially, helping us keep it going. It's very kind. We can't do it without you guys, literally. So you make the difference. So if you want to be part of that, go to patreon.com/thisweekinmormons and sign up, join the team. You know, a couple bucks a month, every little bit helps. We appreciate it very much. Of course, support Devin on his My Life in Alternating Current, whatever it is you're doing.
OurSolarTrailer.com.
That's the one. The trailer
That's the
itself
one.
is solar, not solar powered. It's an actual solar trailer. It comes from the sun. Anyway,
Something like that.
go
Something
visit
like
Devin on
that.
there, and we appreciate all of you taking the time to listen here. Devin, great to see you, my friend. I hope we'll see you soon.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Take care, buddy, and thanks for listening to Twim, everyone. Talk to you next week. Have a good one. Bye bye.